Welcome to Women Entrepreneurs Radio. I'm your host, Deborah Bailey. And when I started this show in 2008, I was on a mission to promote women-owned businesses and help women succeed by providing resources and valuable tips from other women and men, small business owners. In each interview, my guests speak openly about their triumphs, the scary times, and tough decisions they had to make along the way. Women Entrepreneurs Radio is about showing women how to harness their natural strengths to achieve success on their own terms. Hi everyone, welcome to Women Entrepreneurs Radio with your host, Deborah Bailey, and my returning co-host, Kerry Heaps. And I'm really glad to have you join us today. And you're listening to this show on Podomatic, dbcoach.podomatic.com. And you can also go to iTunes to search for Women Entrepreneurs Radio, or you can go to womenentrepreneursecrets.com and click on the radio tab in the menu, and you will find links for all the different places the show is on, including Libsyn. There's some of the older shows are being and new ones too, being uploaded there, and on the SoundCloud, and of course Podomatic. So there's different links, and if any new platforms are added, then you will also find them there as well, or I'll mention it on the show. And also, if you're on iTunes, if you could please leave a review if you enjoyed the show. And if you do that, then it really helps for the show to be found, because all the algorithms running help to push shows forward that have more reviews and things like that. So if you happen to be there, that's great. Or if you want to leave any feedback, of course, you can always do it on the blog, womenentrepreneursecrets.com. So there's different ways you could do that as you wish. So I'd love to hear from you about how you like the show. So please make sure you share that. So right now, I'm going to introduce my co-host, Kerry Heaps. And Kerry is the founder and publisher of Strictly Marketing Magazine. She's also the host of Strictly Marketing Talk Radio. The magazine has recently spun off an online community for women and men too, looking to gain more media exposure. Pitch Like a Bitch Media. She owns Knockout Marketing, a business-to-business telemarketing and lead generation firm. Her passion is to help other entrepreneurs with their marketing efforts to continue their dream of running a successful business. And you can find Kerry at www.strictlymarketingmagazine.com. So welcome back to the show, Kerry.
Thank you, Deb. I feel like a kid in a candy store with this topic we're about to discuss.
Yes. Everyone, we are going to talk about being a guest on podcasts, and this is a very interesting topic because we.
Oh yeah.
Yes, so put it nicely. As show hosts, most definitely, we have opinions about various things, and the whole explosion, you could say, of podcasting has come along, and just tearing a lot of things out there that are a little bizarre. So if you're someone who's looking to use podcasts as a way to share what you know, your expertise, and all that good stuff, you're really going to want to take some notes here, I think. So let's just jump right in.
I'm ready if you are, Deb.
Yes, I'm sure you are ready for this one. Certainly. So there's a lot of misconceptions, expectations have been set that aren't, in my opinion, I could say, not accurate. So I'm going to, put it out to you, Kerry, to get started. Maybe I should ask, as a host, what, people have to, of course, pitch you, to be on your show and that kind of thing. And I would just say what are your expectations for someone who wants to be on your show? What are you looking for from a guest?
Well, a couple of things, come to mind. And it's interesting that you brought up my show, Deb, because, we started out as a podcast, as you well know, we all did, back in the day on Blog Talk Radio. And over the years, mine transitioned into an actual radio program, which has been on hiatus for about a year. And we're actually bringing the show back, but we're bringing it back as a podcast due to my time constraints and things that are going on with the business just being so busy. So a podcast is going to be a better format for us moving forward for right now. So it's still, that's not going to change what we're looking for. It's just the format's changing, that it's going to be pre-recorded rather than live. And everything else will stay the same. Clearly, what do we look for in a guest? Well, several things. First and foremost, we're looking for guests that can provide value to our listeners. We're Strictly Marketing Talk Radio. So with Strictly Marketing, we know that the people who listen to our program and read the magazine, they know they're going to get great marketing content, sales content, things that they can't get elsewhere. And it's going to be really great editorial, whether they read it or they listen to it. And one of the promises that I made when we started the magazine 3 years ago was that we would always have more editorial than we do ads, providing good, valuable content so people didn't feel like they're just reading a bunch of advertorial or listening to a commercial for an hour. So that is first and foremost. We have and always will, whether we're a podcast or a radio program, we always have a submission process. We have everyone fill out a form. That form basically is pretty easy to do. If you have everything prepared properly, we ask for your name, your email, a link to your website address, what it is, what topics you want to talk about. We ask for some sample questions that we can pull from if we choose you as a guest. And we also want to know how you're planning on promoting the show should you be chosen. So we have everybody fill out our form. They click submit. That comes directly to our editorial team. We filter through those because some people will submit things. If you don't have anything to do with marketing, clearly you're not a good fit for the show. And we do have some people who try to bend that tree pretty far. They're actually in data science and they want to talk about how that pertains to marketing, and that's just not a show we would do. So we have to filter through all of that. And, another thing we look at is it's a required question. How are you planning on promoting this show? And I am a big advocate of that. If I'm a guest on someone else's show, and you know this, I heavily promote. I put it on our press page. I put it on social media outlets, and we're scheduling tweets and updates throughout the year. And the reason we do that, it's twofold. That's part of our job as a guest. People don't want to admit that, but if you don't see that in our submission process and you're just marking other, we don't even bother calling you because we know you're not going to promote the show. And I look at it this way. If you're not willing to promote yourself, why should I? Why should my audience? Okay. So you have to ask yourself that question. If you're providing really good quality content, then you should be willing to promote that. Right. You really believe in what you're talking about. So that's a deal breaker for us, a big time deal breaker. Now, sometimes too with us, if we see a submission that looks really good, but it's not a good fit for our show, we do try to make recommendations to that guest and refer them to another host as well, because, clearly we know so many people in the industry. So it's pretty clear cut what we're looking for. Some people who have shows don't have that kind of process, but they want you to pitch them, do a quick pitch, just like a radio station would ask you for. So everybody's different, but I think grounded, hands down across the board, regardless of who you are, people want good quality content for their listeners, because I think one thing that can make you lose listeners quickly is that feeling that they're being sold to. They're not getting anything out of your podcast. Why would they tune in? And, an audience can be pretty fickle. They can, there's tons of podcasts and radio shows out there now. So if you're not going to give them good quality content, the next show will.
Yeah.
Totally agree. I totally agree. I think that's it for people to understand, because there's kind of, and we've talked about this at length. There's this kind of idea out there now that podcast guesting can be something very similar to setting up a Facebook ads funnel. You just kind of set up the procedures and go on podcasts, and I guess give them your link to download whatever or buy whatever, and you're going to make instant sales after you have these appearances. And in some cases, that may be true. I don't know. I'm not going to call people liars, because if they're saying that that's something they've done and everybody can do it too, that's their opinion. But I don't find that to be the case personally. I mean, yes, you can track. We were talking about this earlier. You can track if you give out a URL and people are clicking on it and doing things. But other than that, you don't really know where these particular sales are coming from, number one. Number two, the way I look at the show is like, well, this is discoverability, and this is marketing, and this is getting the word out about what you're doing and giving people an opportunity to learn about you. Mm-hmm. And also, she said, importantly, you're willing to promote your appearance, because that's key to the whole thing. So if you're not willing to do that, that's a big problem. If you're just looking at this as a cash register and that's your only reason for going on a podcast, well, okay, do your thing. But I think the expectations are being set in a way that is not accurate for the average person who's hearing this and thinking that's the purpose of a podcast, as opposed to my point of view. And I guess our point of view is a little different here. So, I find it a little odd. But, there are things that we both know that people should have when they show up and query as a guest. And I know you said you have a form that people have to fill out. So, what are some things that you think that they need to be able to have at the ready?
When they're wanting to fill out a form, or, before they even approach any media outlet, podcast, radio show, TV show, whatever, mm-hmm. They need to have a couple of things in line. First and foremost, they need to have some topics. Why are you an expert? What are the top 3 things that people come and ask you for advice for? Mm-hmm. That's your topics right there. And most people have more than 3, but, start out with 1 or 2. Write up a sample description for each topic of what people can learn by tuning in to this show, what you're going to teach them, and then help the host out by coming up with 5 to 10 sample questions for each topic that they can pull from during the show. It's smart on the guest's part to do this because it helps you kind of control that conversation and keep it in line with what your expertise is. Right. Having a top-rate bio that you're consistently updating and a really great headshot to go along with it. Show people you're the professional that they are, and have a game plan of how you're going to promote this. How are you going to promote this show or this podcast episode if you are a guest? That helps the host, and it shows them that you're serious, and it also helps you, by not promoting it, the only person you hurt in the long run is yourself. Yeah. But again, there's a lot of people that don't feel like they should have to do that, but that's part of the job. Whether you want to accept that or not, it's part of the job of being a guest, of being a good guest, a guest that gets recommended to other hosts, a guest that gets asked back on the show. Yes. You have to, and again, if you think you're going to make money off of your podcast, you better make sure you have a plan to promote it, of how you're going to, utilize that podcast episode to help generate revenue.
Exactly. A plan would be nice.
Yeah, you've got to have a plan. You know, are you going to promote it on social media? Are you going to write a blog post about it? The next article that you do. Another thing I tell people to do is put it in their email signature. Change up your email signature. Click here to listen to my latest interview. People will listen.
Yeah, they do.
And, you know, like I just shared with you, one of the things that I did, I got booked to speak next year at an event that is a women's related event, but for a male dominated industry in the, you know, construction arena. And one of the things I did when I submitted my initial proposal is I said, hey, why don't you take a listen? I was on the Contractor's Way show, and it was a podcast that I did that most people probably would have said, hey, I'm not going to do that because that's not my target audience. I was asked to be on the show. I felt it was an honor. I went ahead and did it. And here it is. I'm sending this link to the person who's in charge of all of these particular expos for construction and male-dominated industries where they need a woman speaker. And I sent her a link to that show, and she loved it. I got booked as a speaker next year. And it's a paid speaking gig, and I'm probably going to get more out of it. But that's because I used the podcast, not because she tuned into that show. I sent her that link so she could listen to it.
Right.
So, you know, you have to, I think, Deb, in podcasting is no different, is the actual, what I call the 3 E's that you can apply to any situation. I think with people, their education, experience, expectations, and execution of podcasting will make or break them.
That's really good. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, yeah, I use this with my networking example because it's the same thing with networking. People, you know, their education level with it, you know, how have they read books about it? But in podcasting, I would say the same thing. What's your education level? If you're brand new to podcasting and you have not done your due diligence, meaning you're only listening to one person because you saw their Facebook ad, you need to go around and you need to look at different podcasts. You need to maybe read a book on podcasting or listen to a couple of different shows out there about podcasting and what it's all about. Try to educate yourself as much as you can on the process, the experience that you have. If you have no experience, that's not a problem. If you've never been booked on a show before, that's not the issue. You can get booked. You just have to start. You have to start that process the right way. And again, some of the tips I've shared today that we've talked about, you know, having your sample topics, you know, why would someone want to have you on the show? How do you provide value to those listeners? Nobody can answer those questions but you. Okay. So you got to sit down and invest some time in writing down your experience and why people feel you're the expert.
Right.
Your expectations need to be in line. We see out there, and it's getting out of control now, I think, to the point where there's so many people that talk about, get paid for being on podcast and, make thousands of dollars just getting interviewed. And it doesn't work that way.
No.
It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't.
And you can generate money. You can help close sales with your podcast interviews or any media they do. You just have to use it the right way and understand that is not something that's going to happen overnight. It is not something that is going to happen all by itself. You are going to have to help that process along. Right. A great example is the conference I just booked to be a paid speaker at for next year. That is a podcast I did last year or a year and a half ago. And, like I said, most people would look at that and think, I'm not going to do that show. You never know where business is going to come from. Never turn down those kind of opportunities because you never know how it will benefit you later on.
Right.
And then lastly, their execution. If you're going in there with the expectation, and I've had people who have approached me that they act like they're doing me a favor by being on my show or writing for my magazine. And I hate to tell people, good quality content, it is a dime a dozen. I can submit a query on ProfNet. I could submit a query out there. I could even put something out there on Facebook or somewhere else and say, hey, I'm looking for, we're accepting guests right now. Fill out our form. And I could instantly have anywhere from 60 to 80 people. And out of those 60 to 80 people, at least 40 or 50 will be overqualified for what I'm looking for. So, for somebody to come to me and have that sort of, let me bless you with my presence. and I'm not alone on this. I know I'm not, as a podcast host or, the trouble we have is not with finding guests. That's not it at all. It's just, there's a lot of work that goes into a podcast. And I'm not going to deal with somebody who's going to be a diva woman or diva man, through the whole process. There's no need for me to. And I can deal with better quality people that understand how this game works and understand they have to promote it. And why would I pick you over them if you're kind of pitching me like, oh, you should have me as a guest and here's why, because I'm wonderful and, I'm going to offer all these free, and, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, back in the day when I first started doing this, and I don't know if you encompass this, Deb, but I mean, that process with Blog Talk Radio was 10 times harder because I was going out there pitching to people. I would love to have you on my show. And I didn't need to do that. I didn't need to come up with the sample topic and questions, and I didn't need to do all that. And believe me, most people who are in podcasting know they don't have to do that, that's your job. You need to bring your part to the table, that there is some work involved in this. So if you're thinking that you're going to go into podcasting, not have to do anything except show up and be interviewed and make tons of money, call us when you get back to planet Earth. We'd love to have a conversation with you at that point in time.
Yes. And I think that is the problem that people are hearing. Their expectations are being set so high that they just have to show up and it's all done and it's wonderful and it's beautiful and now you're famous and people are running to buy everything you're selling and you're just in the spotlight forever. Amen. No. That's not gonna happen like that. I'm just, we know that it's not gonna play out that way. So, you have to look at your expectations and what is it you're trying to achieve and kind of set them realistically. As you said, certainly, Kerry, I totally agree. Listen to other podcasts, get a full picture, not just the one or two people who are telling you this stuff. There's a whole other spectrum out here. All kinds of shows, all kinds of folks. It's more than maybe what you've been exposed to, so possibly that could be something you should consider. And particularly, yes, I'm so glad you mentioned particularly about the topics and the summary, because there's so many times that people don't show up with that. They just don't. I said, what's your topic? What are you talking about? What questions would you like? Talking points that I ask them that you want to be asked so we can keep the conversation going. Because some people are really good at that. I'm sure you've had the experience where the conversation flows, and others, they just will answer and then there you are. You're like, okay, what are we asking next? Because they're not really forthcoming, or they're just saying kind of the same thing over and over, not really expanding on it and really giving you, the listener, any real value. You really have to have that preparation piece, I think. And I'm just going to throw out there also, if you have a PR person doing this, please make sure they're updating you as well and giving you the same information they're giving the host, because I have had situations where I'm hearing one thing and the guest is hearing something else. And the guest shows up and then they're thinking I'm going to ask them A, and I've been told Z, and we've got a disconnect. So make sure that you're kept up to speed. If you're being booked on any kind of media appearance, make sure you're getting all the information, not just podcasts. Okay, Kerry, I know you're chomping at the bit here.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah. Well, basically what I was going to say as well is that with PR companies, clearly we have like a media, with Pitch Like a Bitch, we have our media service. And that's really for people who can't afford, they're not at that level where they need or can afford a PR agent. And, PR people, I mean, I know some that run about $1,000 a month and they go up from there. And I love PR people. To me, they're not bad people. At some point in your business, you're going to need to retain, if you continue to grow and do what you're supposed to be doing, you're going to need to retain their services. But usually in the beginning, there's no need for that. Something like what we do is pretty fair. You can find your own, media outlets as well if you want to invest that time. So, PR people are not bad people. They're not, I see a lot of people that are trying to paint them into let's put them all out of business. And it's like, you can't do that, number one. I mean, you know, the people who use them understand the value of what they're providing and what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And two, we need, you know, most PR agencies that I have dealt with have been very good. I've had one or two that were total nightmares, but for the most part, you know, when you hire a PR agency, you know, they get paid, you know, because they're getting you booked, they're getting you exposure.
Right.
You know, they want to get you out there as much as they can. So, you know, of course, they're going to do a good job for you. And, you know, dealing with them, I mean, typically if I ask them for everything that we need, they get it to me, and they get it to me on time. I've only, like I said, one or two that have been, you know, terrible to work with, but it's, you know, there's definitely a lot of great ones out there. But don't make the mistake of thinking that if you don't have a PR agency that you can't do this on your own. But again, it's a process. And, you know, again, going back to having everything prepared, again, that's like playing poker and you get to deal the cards. You know, by creating those questions, like sample questions, whether the host used them or not, it still gives them something that they can refer back to. And you can create those questions based on how you want that conversation to go to really showcase your expertise if you do it correctly. So, you know, it's to your advantage to do that. You know, why would you not want to do that? And again, it's showing that you're a real professional. You have everything that they could possibly need or want there at their fingertips. And I will tell you, you know, a lot of podcast hosts and radio show hosts have told me, wow, you're really prepared. Thanks for having everything together. You know, by doing that, you're leaving a great impression. And that's what you want to do. The whole goal is, you know, when you're working on other projects or you have a book that you're going to be releasing, you know, I'm working on currently a mini series of books right now that we're going to do another media tour for. And all this is, you know, with a lot of these people that I have done interviews with, it's going to be really easy to get back on their show because I did such a great job.
Right.
You know, and they know I'm going to do exactly what I said I was going to do. That's, you know, just that alone is a huge thing. And one of the things that I get from a lot of people who ask me to be on their show, or especially among podcasters, and maybe you've gotten this too, Deb, but the number one thing I hear from them is that I got to get people to promote the show more. I don't understand why they're not promoting. And I think it's because they have that diva complex, or they've listened to one expert that said, oh, don't do that, you know. And it's really, again, it's hurting the podcaster, but it hurts the guest more. They just don't realize it.
You're so right. That is really super, super, super important point that you have made. And also, I totally agree. Most of the PR people I've worked with have just been golden. Love working with them. They love working with me because, as you said, Kerry, you have everything together. You don't stress them or their guests out. And that's what they want. And they'll refer other people to you. And then, you know, you refer for other, like, podcasts, hosts and things to them. So it can be a really good relationship. But of course, like with anything, there could be one or two people that don't exactly communicate as well as they really should. So from the guest perspective, you really make sure you're asking a lot of questions, but also with the talking points, whether you have PR or not. I totally agree. This is your chance to say, this is how I want to frame this, the conversation. This is how I want to showcase who I am and what I do. So, of course, that's the perfect opportunity for you to do that. And I think sometimes people don't realize they can do that because you're kind of, you know, say, hey, what's your talking points? What do you want to stress? You know, maybe some people feel that when they show up now, you're telling them what they have to do, as opposed to really realizing that they have a lot of the power in that case, because you're working to help the guest shine, because that helps your show to shine. That helps the listener to feel, wow, I got something out of that. Because it's the listeners, all of you listening. We don't want you to sit there and be miserable and go, oh my God, what is this nonsense? And don't they care about that I'm taking my time to listen? Yes, we do. That's why we have these shows in particular. But as hosts, we do care, because we're doing this with you in mind and to give you great content. So as a guest, you're part of that partnership now. And yes, we can do this together, but I find a lot of times maybe it's because the person doesn't realize that they can step into that now and show off their stuff. And with the promotion, I find that to be the case as well. Mm-hmm. You know, do you think it's just that people are hearing the wrong things out here, or they just don't know?
I think hearing the wrong things is a huge, ginormous, gigantic part of the problem. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's true.
Because again, I've heard, and I see tons of it showing up in social media feeds. I see it showing up in Twitter. I see it showing up just in emails that I get. And I think there's a twofold problem with this. Number one, I think you have a lot of people out there that have been doing this less than a year and they think they're an expert. Or they interview what they think is a celebrity, one person, and hey, I can teach other people how to do this.
Yes.
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it depends on how you're framing things. Again, you and I both started with BTR. I started in 2009. I think you started before I did. But we've been doing this a long time. We've seen how the industry's changed. We've seen where it's going. It's still an up and coming media type outlet for podcast. And they, again, if used properly, they can help you generate money.
Yeah.
But you have to participate in that process, just like you have to participate in any part of your success. And there's too many people out there saying, oh, well, here, create this system. And if you create a free gift and get them to funnel into your email list and you can track how many people are listening to the show by creating a specific link and use ClickFunnels. And what people aren't realizing is that number one creates another investment of time and money on your part. That probably is not really like you've said before, you can't control that.
Right.
You can't control it. The only thing you can control is how you're using that interview. Yeah. So again, if you think about it, if you're promoting it on social media, hey, great interview today like I did today. I mean, I talked about on Facebook, I did an interview for the magazine, and I did one for, we're doing our podcast interview today, and just said, hey, make it a great productive day. It gives me more content to talk about on social media of things that I'm doing. And then once the show's released, of course, I promote it because I feel like what I have to say is of value, clearly, and I want people to hear my message because I don't want them to get caught up in so much that's out there where they're spending a couple $1,000s thinking that they're going to make tons of money on being a podcast guest. It's just, again, and I'm not saying I haven't made any money off of a podcast. I don't want people to misunderstand it. I've had people who have called me, but it's very sporadic, and I've been doing this a long time. So it's, probably over a period of almost 10 years now, I've gotten one really big ticket client. And again, that's over a period of 9 years. And then I've had other people who have called and said, hey, I listened to you on so-and-so show. I'd love to have you on my podcast. And then I've had some people say, hey, I've listened to you on this podcast and I want to subscribe to the magazine. How do I do that? So those have come in, but they've trickled in. Where I've seen the best results is where I'm taking those interviews and I'm leveraging them in my sales process. I'm sending those to potential clients. I'm sending those, most people who want to get booked on a podcast, I find, are authors or people that want to get into speaking. Well, here's a great opportunity for you to take those podcast interviews and, send them, like I said, I mean, this past month, I've probably filled out 19 speaking queries for next year. And a month ago, I did about 30 of them. So I'm probably going to get inundated with, invites next month or over the next 2 months just based on the work that I've done. But part of what I did with those proposals is, again, if there's a show that centers around women, I will include my link that, when I was on Judy Hoberman's show on selling in a skirt, talking about, or my interview on First Coast Connect talking about gender equality in the workplace. I try to match up those shows or even my editorial that could be something similar to what I'm going to talk about. By the way, here's an interview based on these 5 concepts in case you'd like to listen to it. And believe me, people listen to those. If you send those to a potential client, I don't care if you're selling insurance, if you're a CPA, and you are contacting a potential client about, hey, this is what I can do for you. Oh, by the way, I was just featured on whatever podcast talking about, IRS loopholes or the best corporate entity for you to formulate, when you're going into business, thought you might be interested, take a listen. People will listen to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they appreciate that. And even if they don't become a client, I had someone last week that I sent a proposal to, didn't hear back from her, I followed up probably 3 or 4 times before I finally heard back from her. And she did decide to go with someone else because she really wanted somebody to work with face to face, which I couldn't do because she's nowhere near me. But she even said, I really enjoyed talking to you. I loved listening to the podcast episode that you sent me. And, let me know when your tour starts. I would love to, make arrangements to come to the city closest to me. So even though that didn't turn into revenue for me now, it could very well turn into revenue down the road. But again, I'm adding value by, sending her that proposal. Oh, by the way, and the reason I feel comfortable sending her that interview is because it was chock full of advice she could use. It wasn't a sales pitch.
Exactly. Right. Right.
So it's utilizing it the right way. That is going to help you the most to maximize your dollars. I mean, I'm sorry, but and people cover themselves. I mean, we've talked about that too. Some of these people that are trying to teach you, you're going to make all this money with a podcast, they protect themselves with a disclosure statement. Read closely, and they even tell you themselves, do your due diligence. We haven't verified, we're just taking people's word for what they're making, and, they have no way of verifying that. Right, so if they can't verify it, you can't verify it. So you need to take their advice, do the due diligence. And I think you'll be surprised with what you find.
Yes. If you're looking for these statements, for the most part, they're usually at the bottom menu of a website. You go all the way to the bottom and look at those menu items, and you usually see disclaimer or disclosure or FTC disclosure. Click on that, and you will find out a few things.
That a lot of them that are doing classes or doing, like a course, like an online course, are including those because they have to cover themselves. I mean, and again, I wish everyone well, but I also, in the same breath, I have to say, when you're dealing with a professional, usually they're not going to paint that kind of picture. They're not going to paint the blue sky and the crystal blue water and, you're on the beach drinking coconut, I mean, the people that I know that are true professionals are going to tell you, you can get there, but you're going to have to work for it. And this is what you're going to have to do. It's not, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, if we were doing all of the work as podcasters or as hosts, and the people we're interviewing aren't doing anything but collecting a paycheck, how backwards does that sound to you? I mean, really think about that.
Yeah, we'd have to be kind of stupid.
Well, I mean, even having a podcast, as you well know, there is a ton of work that goes into it. A ton. So, I mean, people have to have it for the right reason. And you have to, at some point, you are going to have to monetize your podcast. Yes. You're just going to have to, even if it's just monetizing it enough to get the expenses covered, you're going to have to do that because it is going to cost you money.
We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back.
Hi, this is Deborah. Not only am I host of Women Entrepreneurs Radio, but I'm also a writer and coach. I've learned that making professional changes calls for a change in mindset, and that's not always easy to do. In my book, Think Like an Entrepreneur, Transforming Your Career and Taking Charge of Your Life, you'll learn the 5 steps to thinking like an entrepreneur so that you can move from idea to action. You'll also get information on how to manage fear of failure and how to banish self-doubt. And you'll receive lots of motivation to pick you up and point you in the right direction when you're facing the emotional and mental challenges that come with making life changes. In fact, one reviewer said, the book gave me ideas to match with my own feelings. This book is clear, straightforward. All tips are really good and easy to apply. I couldn't agree more. So get your copy today of Think Like an Entrepreneur, Transforming Your Career and Taking Charge of Your Life. It's available in print, ebook, and audiobook on Amazon.com.
And it didn't really start out that way. And perhaps at some point we could do an episode about podcast hosting. It's not horrendous, but there are things that you have to know.
Yeah, I mean, and again, you have to have, it's a purpose behind it too.
Yes.
It's the same thing too. When you are going to be a guest on podcast, there's a purpose behind that.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to, it's a twofold purpose. You want to get that exposure, but in order for you to get that exposure, you are going to have to provide valuable content for the listening audience.
That's
End of story.
That's the key. And really the important point that we're making here is the value added that you are providing. So when you strip that away and your whole reason is I'm just going to make this into another cash machine, quote unquote, then who's the value? The value stops being on the content, it stops being on the people listening to you. It even maybe isn't even on the host. It's just on what you can get out of the situation.
Right.
So why should people deal with you if that's how you're coming across? And, just as Kerry said, the hosts aren't just sitting there giving you a platform so you can walk away with millions. I mean, why would we do that?
Well, why would we? And we can't. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Exactly. We can't do that. So, just think it through logically. Question these things a little bit. Don't just assume, as we said about disclaimers and disclosures, don't assume because someone says 6 figures. They could be, I think you said that once, Kerry, they could be counting the figures a certain way. They could be actually 6 figures and maybe it's like $1,000, maybe it's $2, who knows? And a bunch of zeros in the front. It suddenly all changes. But don't assume because someone says something and says it in a forceful way or in a persuasive way that this must be true because of how they're sounding and how they're saying it. That's all part of their sales process. But really do some due diligence, some logical, critical thinking about why, if this is true, look at it, think about it, consider it first. And if you are going to look at it as, well, I'm just cutting this up as a funnel just to get paid, well, nothing wrong with that, but think it through and know what you're doing and have realistic expectations as to what can be achieved. And that's the course you take. Just don't believe that you can just going to jump up and suddenly checks are going to just fall into your lap. I think a lot of it too is people kind of lose the fact that you can get on these different podcasts and you can use your content, which a lot of people don't, and it's amazing how many people really don't use their content in ways that help promote them and promote their message and promote their product and their service. I mean, there it is right there. In an intimate medium, you've got it. You've got that recording you can keep using over and over again. So it's like, don't miss out on that value that you've created now that also will help to get your message out there as Kerry's using hers. I mean, this is something good. So don't let it just kind of slip through your fingers and not really utilize that. So, these are just things that we've seen and experienced over the time and realizing maybe some people are kind of heading for the wrong, what I say are the wrong things because you're not seeing the value you do have and kind of looking for this pot of gold instead of seeing the value of the content itself and how you play a part in creating it and distributing it and using it to promote what you want to promote. Also, one thing I want to ask your opinion on, Kerry, is the idea of influencers, which, this has become a popular term. And this also gets, tossed around in the podcast world as well as I guess is in any of the online media particularly, not just of course online, but hearing it more and more. I recently read a post where the person was saying, well, how are you just determining an influencer? Is it just the number of followers or because they have nice pictures online? I mean, how are we looking at this? How are we defining this term? And I think, Kerry, in terms of how you're seeing it used with podcast, quote unquote, experts, does this give you any certain feelings?
The term influencer, there are tons of people that are considered influencers. I mean, you've got Mary Smith, you have You've got Allie Brown. You think of any big name person that is, has a huge, massive following based on their Twitter numbers, based on, their spots in the media. I mean, we saw Allie Brown on the Undercover Millionaire. There's different ones in different industries, and usually most people in their industry, they can think of one or two people that they consider an influencer. Influencers, here's the thing. Most people who are at that level, if you're getting started or you're thinking that you're going to partner with that influencer, and they're going to help you get exposure, I would say think again. And it's not that they're jerks. It's not that they're mean people. It's just they've built their empire. They've got a lot going on. Now, I think they're good people to follow. I think they're good people to, if they've written a book, maybe check out their book, or, if they've got something going on that you feel will provide value to you, check that out. But too many people, I think, are making it sound like, connect with these influencers and they'll follow you and they'll, and I've had some of them retweet some of my stuff. And did I see a huge spike in anything? Did I have like 1,000 people running up to me saying, hey, I want to hire you? No. I mean, again, it's the expectations. I'm sure it's kind of difficult, but do I think I could get Allie Brown on the phone? Sure. I think I could. I have a magazine. I could call her office and say, hey, I'd love to interview you, on marketing, put you on the cover of the magazine. And it would be tough, but I think I could do that. But even with me putting her on the cover of my magazine, that does not automatically make her a friend. It doesn't make her, that would be like the beginning of building that business relationship. I can't expect her, okay, I had you on the cover of my magazine. Now this is what I need from you. It's just not going to work that way. And I think too many people are thinking when they're saying connect with influencers, follow them, the influencers in your arena, but don't make the assumption that, they're going to help you get to the next level. They have their own empire that they're running. It's just,
that's true.
You need to connect with people. If you're looking for people to help you promote what you're doing, connect with people that are trying to do what you're doing. Like-minded people, will help you the most, kind of building that up. And, then that way it's a win-win for both of you. You build on that way up. And that's what most influencers have done anyway. I mean, back in the day, nobody heard of Allie Brown. And now everybody does. But I mean, that took her a long time to establish that and a long time to build it up.
That's an excellent point because, as we've seen, there's expectations again being set that these influencers are just sitting there waiting for you to come to them so they can take you by the hand and lead you.
And again, and maybe, for example, people are always looking for mentors. I mean, I'm sure that if you reached out to somebody and said, hey, I really need a mentor, I think most of them would probably, try to refer you to somebody but the chances of them saying, oh yeah, sure, I'm going to take time out of my schedule and mentor you, which that is a different thing. And I've mentored people, I think it's the way that it's being talked about.
Yes, that's it.
Lolly Daskell, she's another one. I follow her on Twitter and I think she follows me and I think she retweeted a couple of things that I've done. But, again, even for all of the millions and millions of followers that she has, I was certainly grateful for her retweeting, but I certainly didn't think, oh wow, she just retweeted something, I'm going to be rich. I mean, that would be kind of dumb for me to say that,
Right.
And I'm sure if she heard me say that, she'd probably be like, I need to delete that tweet. I mean, clearly she's stupid. Yeah.
But that's what's being said out here. That's what
that's not a good thing then.
That's what's being told to people, that they're just sitting and waiting for you to run to them so they can help you, I guess, reach Mount Olympus with them. Like, we're just sitting and waiting. Please come to us so we can, and no, that's not the case, really. They're doing their thing just like you're doing yours. And I'm sure that many of them would be willing to mentor or answer a question or refer you. Not saying that they're just like, well, don't bother me, but I think the expectation that I've heard said is that they're just waiting there. Like they're sitting at the desk waiting for you to call. And then as soon as you do, you're going to be famous when they shine the spotlight on you. And that's not true. This is Women Entrepreneurs Radio, available on nbsp.podomatic.com and iTunes.
Another thing that I would point out too, because a lot of people talk about, oh, you need to have certain equipment and, you need to have the best microphone.
That's true.
And I've seen some of these microphones people buy, they're $200-$300. I'm like, are you kidding me? Do yourself a favor, go to Office Depot, go online. Plantronics has a great headset that you can use. It's noise canceling, has a mute button, and it will sound like you are in a studio. So and it's like $30, I think, $30 or $40. So there's no need to run out and buy all of this crazy looking equipment that you should have. And just, if you have a really good headset, there's just no reason for you to go and do that. That's just crazy.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that actually, because that was something that I kind of forgotten to touch on. But you're right, because it can be very intimidating. Because that's another thing that, people are told. And if you look online and want to get information about being on a podcast or even starting one, you may be told that you've got to have all this super sophisticated equipment. Actually, someone, when I was just had joined Google Plus, and someone had a Google Hangout about writing, I believe, and she was recommending one of those microphones. It's like a couple $100, and I was like, really? You have to do this, and unless you're doing a lot of work, a lot of interviews, or a lot of whatever you're doing, that you're going to utilize this and you're all into that stuff, then maybe it's a different story. But if you're just occasionally doing interviews and you're maybe just starting out, I think you've got to be a little careful about that, especially since you can get other kinds of equipment and get good sound anyway. So, what is that all about? Like, don't just run out and spend all this money, and then there you are, and you're out of a few $100s, and you're really not sure why. So that's a great point to mention.
Well, I think a lot of them are doing it because there's some type of affiliate commission, probably through ClickBank or something like that. If they recommend this microphone and somebody buys it, they get 10% of that or whatever. But, again, you don't need to go that far by any means. Just if you have a good quality headset, that's fine. And you've got, if your computer is on the brink, it's really slow, that could affect it. But I think, you're going to want to upgrade your computer anyway, because if you're in business for yourself, you need to have a good computer. I wanted to touch just for a minute here, Deb, on fear. Because I think that also plays a really big role for a lot of these people. I have, and I'll give you a great example. This doesn't have anything to do with podcasting, but I think it's the same exact fear. I think that, with our marketing services, we have a division where we help businesses and, with their marketing. And I've had 3 clients from the same company that I have been dealing with. This has been going on for a month, where I basically told them they wanted to get started. And I said, well, here's the contract, and this is what I need from you to get started. Once we have that, we can get started for you and start working on stuff. And since then, I have not only not gotten a contract or gotten anything started for them, however, I have gotten 5 or 6 different emails from all 3 of them with silly questions. Can we change this? Can we change that? And finally, I just said, look, this is what we need to get started. If this isn't something that you can do, then it's not a good fit. You either need to work with someone else or think about this a little bit more. And it's not because they're nitpicking. It's because of fear. Because once we get started and we start marketing for you and we will get you results, you are going to have to perform. So there's a fear there. A fear of failing, a fear of not being able to close, not being able to sell. And I see it a lot in that business. And I think it does happen here in podcasting too. I think there's a lot of people, and if you're suffering from that fear that, oh, I don't want to go out there and sound like an idiot, or I don't know what to say, or I don't know how to go about this, and you feel like signing up for these classes or prolonging the process is giving you the illusion that you're doing something to work towards it, but in essence you're not. You're setting yourself backwards by leaps and bounds. Yeah. So with fear, you're an expert. Think of it this way. Don't think of it as being a guest on a podcast. Think of it as being whatever you are, a CPA, an accountant, a doctor, a real estate agent, whatever you are. Think of you in that aspect. We'll just use the CPA. Think of you as a CPA, and that appointment that you have at 2:00 to do that podcast is actually the appointment that you're going to have to talk to all these prospective business owners that really don't understand what to do with their taxes, or how can they save the most money, or how can they, what's the best way for them to incorporate, or do they need to change that? Think of it in that aspect. So that way you go into expert mode. And I see it happen all the time where people are so nervous about their first show. You get them talking and it's like, wow, where is this person? I mean, they're really good because they go into expert mode. Right. But don't think for a second by signing up for classes or going to different, reading up, at some point you have to, like the commercial says, just do it. And you are going to have to get over that fear. So the best way for you to do that is to get into your expert mode, schedule the first one. Once you get that first one over, it's easy at that point because you have everything done. You got those sample questions done. You got the topics done. You have your procedure done of how you're going to go about doing this and who you're going to be contacting. And once you get bit by that podcast bug, it's, you're going to want to do it again and again and again. I mean, it really is. It's a lot of fun. But it's the first one. And I see people let fear keep them from that. And they think, well, it's that same mindset. Well, if I sit here and I keep talking about doing it, it's the same as me doing it. And it's not. It's avoidance, and it's letting the fear take over. And like I said, if you sign up for one of these things that, are close to $1,000 and you lay out all that money and then you're still not doing anything, again, you just put yourself behind several steps.
Right. That's an excellent point too. I'm glad that you made that point. It's not something that you should really be afraid of. I feel, of course, that maybe it's easy for me to say on this side of things, but when it comes down to investing your money in programs or trying to tell you that, well, we're going to give you all this training and this is going to happen, that's going to happen, everything's going to happen. Maybe, as Kerry said, just query a show and just give it a try. See what happens. Present yourself and go out there. You may find that it's a lot easier, flows better, you feel better about than you realized you were going to. There's nothing wrong with media training. I'm sure Kerry would agree if you feel that you need to have that kind of thing. But I think that's a totally different kind of thing than what some of these programs are offering, in my opinion.
And I would definitely agree. And I think when you see where people are doing trainings and classes, I mean, and we do some of that ourselves, with our, with the tour that we're going to do. But again, the media training is only so much. Where this really falls into is your expertise, your category of expertise. Are you really an expert? And that will show through in the interview. Believe me. So don't let any of these things that are going on that you see out there fool you to think, oh, I've got to take these classes. I need to do, you got to get the first one over with, and it does get easier from there. I mean, are you going to make mistakes? Sure. We all have. We've all said stupid stuff on air, of course. But, if anything, I think that makes you look more human. I don't like it, but, sometimes those shows where it's just like I had a show where I didn't mess up bad, but it was like, it was almost like turning into kind of an argument. And that's actually where I got some people that gave me feedback that I did really well, and that, I actually got some business from the show. So, don't discount that. I mean, it's part of who you are. I mean, people are you're human. You're only you're going to make mistakes. All of us are.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the more relaxed you sound and the more authentic that you are in your responses and how you're having the conversation, the better it's going to be. You're going to connect with the listener. If you're sounding like it's just something that you're doing naturally. It's not really forced and stiff. That makes a difference because when people hear, like I said, it's an intimate medium. They're perceiving you totally different than if they're watching you on a video. It's a totally different way to connect. It could be a very, very powerful way to connect. If you really take advantage of it and see how powerful it can be for you to make that connection with a prospect, someone who may become a prospect, someone who may not really be interested in buying, but they may like you, like what they hear. And then they may refer, like, hey, check out this podcast that I heard with so-and-so. So you never know how that's going to play out. You never know. You can't assume that everybody listening is going to buy from you, but you don't know who is going to be listening, and you don't know what their perception is going to be based on how you're coming across. You're relaxed, you're into what you're talking about. You're the expert. You're claiming that. Give it a chance. Don't feel you have to have years and years and years of training and preparation and spend tons of money to be prepared. That's not the case at all. I certainly don't think so, and Kerry obviously doesn't. So
no, and like I said, I would just say, you need to do your due diligence. Know that, you are an expert, and just get over that fear. Just do one podcast. Once you do the first one, it's easier.
And you just be yourself, which is really what people want. They don't want you to turn to some other kind of persona and pretend because someone is telling you that's what you have to do for a payday or whatever it is. Just be yourself, and people are going to really buy into that. They want to hear from you. That's the point.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. They do. And they want to, they're tuning in for a reason, and, it all clings together. But, again, it's just, like we said before, there's just so much out there right now that's really flooding the marketplace. And it's, my one goal and my hope for people who are listening is that you take this advice to heart, because the one thing I don't like to hear is when I have somebody contact me and say, I would really love to sign up for, your email list, to get media updates, but I can't afford it because I spent all my money on this program and that program. And how did that work for you? Well, clearly it didn't work because I'm not making any money. And then they're bitter. That's the one thing that I hate. And I get that a lot. Yeah. I really do. And it's sad to me, because it's like, because they're saying, if I would have heard about this sooner, but again, you got to do your due diligence. And like I said, don't think that just because it's a sponsored ad on Facebook or on LinkedIn or Twitter, that's the person that has all the answers. Chances are there's a reason that they're advertising. So keep that in mind. And just really, look at more than one program. Again, this process, it's really a simple process. It doesn't need to be complicated.
I'm glad you said that. Really, it really is. That's really what it comes down to. And please be careful about where you investing your money and your time. Please be careful, because this isn't new. To buy this and magically everything will fall into place. It's not new. I'm sure it's been around forever in one form or another. And yes, people have lost money investing in things that don't lead to anything for them.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just, like I said, that's my main goal. And just like I said, I know fear plays a huge role in this. Yes, because again, they're thinking, well, I signed up for this class and, but logistically it still comes down to you producing what needs to be done, and then putting yourself out there. And the only person that can do that is you.
Just a matter of querying and checking out each podcast that does accept guests and looking to see what they're about, listening to a few shows. I mean, people contact me, they'll say, yes, I listened to your show, and some of the time they'll send a link to the exact show they listened to and what they thought of it before they pitch, so they kind of show that, yeah, I'm familiar with this, or they've been referred by someone else. You know, Kerry has referred people to me, and I've referred people to Kerry, and that's what you do because you've had a good experience with that person, you like them, you like what they have to say, and you'll let someone else know about it. Yeah, fear can be a big one, and I think a lot of times a lot of people out here will take advantage of your fear.
Right. They will.
Yeah.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And they'll try to make the process, it's just like the Facebook ads. I mean, there was something not too long ago I signed up for just to see what it was. And the gist of it was the person wants you to hire her company to do your Facebook ads or to produce them and keep track of them and everything. So the video was about how to do Facebook ads to generate, really good quality leads. And after the first one, I quit listening for two reasons. Number one, they were overcomplicating the process. I mean, using a lot of other stuff that even Facebook tells you don't need to use, but they were doing that for a reason. Let's overcomplicate this process so this person will hire me. Now, I think it's a good deal if you don't have the time to do it and you want to pay someone else. But as far as making that process, I mean, I had to give her kudos. She overcomplicated that process big time. And I couldn't even sit through the whole video. I mean, that's how bad it was.
Oh my gosh.
So I think that was her goal. She wants people to get so frustrated in the first video that they call her and say, I don't want to do this. I want you to do it. But podcasting, getting booked as a guest is not hard. I will say probably the most time-consuming part is going to be finding media outlets, doing that, research and finding how they want things presented and what email address to send it to. That's time-consuming, but the rest of it is easy. It does not need to be hard. You do not need to be personally affiliated with these people to get on their show. You don't need to know somebody who's in with them to get booked on their show.
Right.
How you're going to get booked on their show is by providing good quality content. And if you don't hear back from them, I would say for probably every 10 submissions I do, I get 3 or 4 that will call me and say, yeah, I'd like to have you as a guest on the show. So which that's, if you get 1 or 2 out of every 10 you submit, that's good. I mean, those are good numbers. And, once you have all of this stuff prepared, it's just a matter of submitting it and customizing it a little bit. It's just like the speaking arena, I think, Deb. You have all the same information, but you got to customize it for each individual one, but you have the bulk of the work is done.
Right.
You just need to get together what they're wanting and submit it. So this is really no different. And if, again, some of these people that don't want to do any of this, but yet they want speaking engagements, you're in for a big time shock.
Yeah, you definitely have to show up with your information.
Well, you got to show up with your information, but they also too, they have their own process. And if you don't want to follow it, there's, 30, 40 other people that are willing to do it that will gladly take that exposure and gladly get paid. So, and keep in mind too, podcasting is one rung on the media wheel. It's one spoke on that wheel. Start out with podcasting, you've got blogs you can write for, magazines you can write for, you can get interviewed on the radio, you can get interviewed on television, on video podcasts. I mean, there's so many other different aspects once you get started. So don't think that podcasting is the only answer. I think that would be another thing I would throw in there is that's one spoke on that wheel.
There's not just one answer to all your issues or your whatever, your dreams. Oh, this one thing is going to bring me fame and fortune. No. So if someone's telling you that, run away, because that's not true. You have different things that you may target. That as Kerry's saying, that you can now use your basic query, your bio, those things that you should really have at the ready, and take those and do any kind of modifications you have to for each situation, and have your plan of action as to who you're going to reach out to and how are you going to do that. It's really just consistency and showing up.
be easy to work with. And
Yes.
when we talk about that, it's just be prepared, do what you say you're
Yes.
going to do, and don't come into it that this is a team effort. And if somebody has you on their podcast, you need to do your part to be on that team.
It's being professional and being a team player as well.
Yeah.
Because, I create a system, Kerry is a system to get people through the process, the workflow, whatever the word du jour is, to get you from start to finish so that it's smooth for everyone. That there's a lot going on behind the scenes there so that can happen. And when you give a good show and a good conversation, when people hear that, they like it. They really do, and they respond. And they'll say, well, I really enjoyed that. They'll want to know more about you, what you're doing.
Exactly. And like I said, it's all doing the podcast. It's the first step. And,
Yes.
Keep in mind with podcasts, the one great thing about those is that they stay on there forever.
Yeah.
I still have people that go back and listen to the very first episode I did on BTR, even though we don't broadcast on that platform anymore. I can still log in and see my stats, and people still go back and listen. I mean, and that was almost 9 years ago. So, you have to realize that it's all in how, you never know when someone's going to stumble across it, but it's all in how you use it. If you don't, it's just like, the best example I can give, Deb, it's almost like if you buy, like right now I'm currently learning French. Well, I have a CD and book program that I got. Now I'm sitting here, I'm looking at it, and I was, listening to one of the CDs the other night and practicing my words. But with me getting that, you can get a thing to learn how to speak any language, but you want to learn how to speak French. Me sitting here staring at the CDs and the books is not going to get me to learn French. It's me picking up the CDs, listening to them, working in the workbook and practicing that's how I'll learn. So just buying it and saying, I'm going to learn French and, and that doesn't do it. You still have to, it's the first step in the process. And, again, promotion goes a long way. I mean, you need to, and, again, you got to go back and ask yourself, if I'm not willing to promote myself, why should anyone else?
Exactly.
If you really believe in what you're saying and it's going to help people, promote it. Promote it. Because some people think, oh, well, that's me being obnoxious. Well, no, it's not.
No, it's not.
It's you sharing that information so it can get into the hands of other people.
Exactly.
And you would be surprised. I mean, and you will, by doing that. I mean, I had, and this is just a quick side story, but, on one of our Facebook fan pages, I was sharing a post in several different groups, probably about 20 or 30 different groups. And I checked the stats on it the other day because we had 2 people that came back and said, I want more information. And I checked the stats on that to see how many people actually were able to see that post. And I think we're a little over 2,500 for the amount of people, which is a lot for Facebook groups to see. And then having 2 people, come back and say they want more information. So, but if I had not posted that in the groups, I wouldn't have had that interaction.
Right.
So, but I had to do that. So, I mean, again, you have to you got to promote yourself. You really do. I mean, it's, if you're not comfortable with that, I think you need to question whether or not you should be in business for yourself.
So I think we've covered a lot of different directions of this. So is there anything else that you want to add, Kerry?
No, I would say I think we covered the gamut with this one. We've said a lot, and I think hopefully, like I said, that's my ambition, my goal with this was to educate people. This does not need to be an overcomplicated process. This does not need to be anything to be feared. It's just you have to put in the work, get over that fear, do the first podcast, and really do your due diligence. If you're looking at going to an event or a class or something like that, really do that due diligence because it can get quite expensive. There's no reason for it to be expensive. There's no reason for it to be a huge investment of time. And I find a lot of people hide behind that because they feel like, hey, I'm doing something. I'm working towards that goal, even though I'm not actually doing something. And all it does is it puts you further behind.
People are trying to sell a product, and that's how they're doing it. And they may be preying on a fear or anxiety you have in order for them to present this thing as the answer for you. But, just check out, and even if you just check out that disclaimer page, just go, whoever it is you're following, go to the bottom of their website. Usually they're making claims. There's going to be a disclaimer link down there.
Yeah. And they're doing that because they've got to cover themselves. And again, I don't think everybody doing that is doing it to take advantage of you.
No.
They're doing it to cover themselves, because when you come up short and you come back to them and say, hey, this didn't work for me, they're covered as far as a refund or something like that. So, always read the fine print regardless.
Yeah. Right. That's really what it is. It's not there because you're saying, oh, I'm trying to take something from you. It's pretty much, it's a standard practice thing. And of course, from a legal perspective, it's good to have too, especially if one's making claims as to what money you can make. So it's other businesses do this too. And that we're not saying that, because you see that there and that's automatically a red flag. But it's just a way for you to realize that maybe what they're saying on one part of the site may contradict some other things. If they're saying results not typical in a disclaimer, but they're making it sound that it is typical on the landing page, that's a tip off right there that is something's off center here. So just take that with you and you'll be glad that you heard that piece of advice. I think we'll wind this up now, and just want to, thank everyone for hanging in there and listening to this good stuff. And if you want to be a guest, now you've got all the details of what you can do to get started. So I hope this is very helpful for you. So once again, it's Women Entrepreneurs Radio with your hosts, Deborah Bailey and Kerry Heaps. And so glad you could join us today, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us. You can also join in the conversation on Facebook.com/Women Entrepreneurs and on the website, WomenEntrepreneursSecrets.com. And don't forget to listen in on dvcoach.podomatic.com and on iTunes.